Welcome from the studios of KPBS TV in San Diego, California. We are reaching you live through a unique and complex international telecommunications network via satellite, microwave, and cable. The International Training Center at San Diego State University brings us all together in this video conference, which joins distinguished organizations located in Mexico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and the United States of America. Welcome to our program, Investment and Entrepreneurship Strategies in a Global Setting, the Key to Sustainable Success. This is the 9th video conference of the series Competitive Success with a Global Focus. My name is Richard Page, and I will be your moderator for today's program. I am a private attorney with the Page Firm, a professional corporation located here in San Diego that specializes in the areas of business and international litigation, including alternative dispute resolution. Today's video conference is composed of 2 presentation modules and 2 question and answer sessions. We will look forward to your live participation. Our ability to raise capital, invest, and manage operations with a global perspective is fast becoming the key to the success of our organizations. Entrepreneurship and creative business planning must establish policies and identify opportunities, adapting always to national and regional realities so that we may succeed into the next millennium. This is particularly true for highly capital-intensive service and technology companies, which may have to compete face-to-face against government-owned or recently privatized organizations with years of market tradition and national visibility. The challenge is particularly crucial for institutions of higher education, which must now learn to partner and expand their services to reach across borders with an entrepreneurial spirit. This video conference will elaborate on these and other considerations essential for long-term competitive success with a global focus. A list of practical steps and strategies for international ventures, coupled with the appropriate timing for entering a new market, will be presented as necessary conditions for successful entrepreneurship. That is the art and science of creating ideas and transforming them into reality. What are the motivations, personal characteristics, skills, and tools needed in this process? Has our new global setting in the areas of business, education, and government produced new expectations for growth and entrepreneurship? Or has it made our productive environment more complex, aggressive, and non-attractive? I would offer that the former is true. Even difficult cultural and environmental obstacles will not detract from our basic right to aspire to better economic and social welfare by searching for new geographical horizons and partnering across the world. The resulting interdependence of our communities will only bring us added value and shared economic benefits. This is the essence of investment and business across borders. It is a pleasure to introduce to you today's distinguished speakers, Mr. David Haigh and Dr. Robert Schlesinger. Mr. Haigh obtained his bachelor's degree from the University of Alberta and his law degree from the University of Toronto. In his lengthy career, he has had a wide variety of experience in most areas of law as a counsel in civil litigation and arbitration cases. He has also served as an arbitrator on various arbitration panels for the International Chamber of Commerce, known as the ICC, and the American Arbitration Association, known as the AAA. He has also presided and participated on a number of international arbitration panels and has acted as a sole arbitrator on a number of occasions. Mr. Haigh is a member of various arbitral organizations, including the International Chamber of Commerce and the British Columbia International Commercial Arbitration Center, among others. Dr. Schlesinger has 40 years of experience, which, if encapsulated into a couple paragraphs, covers 3 careers, which can be briefly described as follows. Dr. Schlesinger's first career was with large U.S. corporations, including General Electric, TRW, ITT, and Teledyne. He held various positions with these companies, including design engineer, director of systems engineering, director of research and development, and vice president of marketing. These assignments covered the period from 1951 through 1970. Dr. Schlesinger's second career started in 1970 with the founding of his own company, which was an engineering manufacturing operation that grew to about 85 employees. As CEO, he operated the company until its sale in 1980 to a New York Stock Exchange listed company. Dr. Schlesinger has just completed his third career as an academic. He is now Professor Emeritus here at San Diego State University, having taught production management and decision-making courses since 1984. During the course of the above assignments, Dr. Schlesinger lived in Europe for 2 years, in Asia for 1 year, and has traveled extensively in these areas on business. Welcome, Mr. Haigh and Dr. Schlesinger. Let us begin with an introductory question. Strategic planning seems to be the critical factor in entering an international market. How does the businessman or the businesswoman know when it is time to go global? Mr. Haigh.
Well, first the answer depends, of course, on what kind of business we are talking about. But in general, it seems to me you will go global when you can say that you have the resources, the capital, and the vision that will pull you forward. To me, it's a little bit like a courtship. First, you have the image of your potential lover, and then you begin to take the steps that will draw you forward, such as flowers, wine, music. Our creativity, of course, is unlimited in this respect. But eventually, you have to act. There's always the chance that you won't succeed, but most of us talk ourselves into going forward anyway. It takes courage, it takes enthusiasm, but I think that these are the essential elements that are involved.
Dr. Schlesinger.
Well, I agree that resources are very critical. I agree that type of business is critical, whether you have a service type business you're trying to take internationally or a product. It also depends on the size of the company. A large company has more resources, can do marriages such as Mercedes-Benz just did with Chrysler. The little company might have to depend on a distributor or an intermediary to avoid the cost of traveling internationally, which can be very, very expensive and time-consuming.
Thank you for your comments. Let us begin with Module 1, in which Mr. Haigh will explain why Canadians have more in common with Latin America and Asia than with the United States, and will offer his checklist of strategies for survival in the global economy.
Thank you. I am very pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you today. You may be surprised to hear that as a Canadian, I believe I have many more things in common with other professionals and business people in Latin America, Asia, and other parts of the world than you might at first suppose. The Canadian economy, although reasonably well developed in some respects, is like that of many other trading countries in that it shapes itself to accommodate and to exchange goods and services with the enormous economic activity of the United States. As a result, a good deal of what we need to take into account as entrepreneurs is strongly influenced by the standards, business conditions, and expectations of those who conduct business activities with others in the United States. In other words, we Canadians share with you this challenging experience of buying and selling goods and services with businesses from the United States. Our next-door neighbor is also yours. It is very relevant for all of us to know about and prepare ourselves for dealing with this interaction. As a relatively developed economy, Canada has increasingly experienced the phenomena of many of its larger corporations and intermediate corporations becoming transnational and entering into business arrangements in developing economies, particularly in Latin America. This development appears to have accelerated in recent years, in part because of the increasing globalization of the world's trade patterns, as well as the increased perception of beneficial economic opportunities presented by developing economies in the Western Hemisphere. Canadian companies bring to their economic activities similar technological and financial strengths to those of their Canadian or American counterparts, but are largely unencumbered by past political or economic history in this region. Consequently, the learning process of Canadian corporations investing abroad, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, has been focused on many of the questions which are raised by the topic for this program. What are the conditions which transnational corporations seek in order to further their international strategies? What are the services and regimes which best foster that type of activity? What strategies will most likely lead to longer-term investment success? The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, in its World Investment Report, the UN Trade Report for 1997, published an analysis of foreign direct investment flows worldwide. Their conclusion was that there is currently a boom in such investment flows, which began in 1995 and which appears to be continuing. In 1996, for example, some $350 billion of foreign direct investment flowed between developing and developed economies. In 1997, that figure was $425 billion. Some 54 countries were on the inflow side and some 20 countries on the outflow side. Quote, unlike the two previous investment booms in 1979 to 1981 and 1987 to 1990, the first one being led by petroleum investments in oil-producing countries and the second one being concentrated in the developing world, the current boom is characterized by considerable developing country participation on the inflow side, although it is driven primarily by investments originating in just two countries, the United States and the United Kingdom, end quote. The authors of the UN Trade Report went on to express their opinion that, quote, there are signs that an even greater number of countries will take part in the present boom as it unfolds on the inward side, for example, developing countries in Latin America, as well as on the outward side. Other examples, France, Germany, and Asian developing countries. For good or ill, most observers recognize that the current trends of market liberalization and globalized economic activity appear to be at the forefront of most countries' economic agendas and are increasingly establishing the norm for economic activity and development. While domestic governments and those concerned with local cultural and political considerations may be either resistant or alarmed by such developments, the fact remains that for most countries, the benefits of increased economic activity in the form of improved living standards and employment opportunities will likely impel them to continue with these present trends. As a further indication of the significance of this process, the UN Trade Report I earlier referred to also confirmed that, quote, despite the growing number of small and medium-sized enterprises with investments abroad, a good part of foreign direct investment continues to be concentrated in the hands of a small number of companies. The largest 100 transnational corporations, ranked on the basis of the size of foreign assets, own $1.7 trillion in assets in their foreign affiliates, controlling an estimated 1/5 of global foreign assets, end quote. Politically, this concentration of economic power in the hands of relatively few companies may seem to be alarming. At the same time, it's evident that the breadth of this form of economic activity is also beneficial. It is my impression that it has also apparently become much more sensitive in recent years to local concerns and conditions. One hopes that will continue to be the case. In any event, The objective of this program is to consider the ways in which all of us may learn better to work effectively with this form of development and to enhance the conditions which will ensure that it is beneficial both to the investors and to the host countries where the investment is taking place. I acknowledge the philosophical dilemmas which accompany this type of economic activity, but I do not propose any simple solutions. Before turning to my checklist of strategies, let me make a general observation. Recently, some disturbance in international capital markets has developed. Hopefully, the factors which appear to be causing these conditions will be remedied in short order. The conditions to which I refer include the general slide in the value of commodities such as oil, gold, and metals, the flood of devaluation in most currencies, and especially in the developing economies, unwelcome signs that interest rates for borrowing by both governments and the private sector are rising. As we all know, cycles in business may come and go, and for most of us, we can really only do our best to anticipate such events and to respond in a timely way to the external conditions which affect our business. As you will hear during my other remarks in this talk, however, it is my opinion that while certain phenomena may be beyond our control, many things can be done to foster optimal conditions for investment. If the playing field in a host country is kept even for all participants and the sanctity of contract is upheld, the probability is that international investment will continue to flow. Where such conditions do not prevail, risk capital will, no doubt, be in short supply. So too, where public sector currency management is kept within responsible bounds, I believe that investors will tend to continue to do business, even in difficult times. And the purpose of my address, therefore, is to touch on some of the ways in which I believe entrepreneurs and professionals can successfully integrate themselves into global activities and international trade. It seems to me that there are certain fairly well-recognized ground rules that can be kept in mind to assist in this respect, but which, of course, bear repeating. In summary, my short checklist of things to think about and to plan for when contemplating international trade in goods or services would include the following. 1. Planning strategies. 2. Professional services. 3. Patents and intellectual property. 4. Dispute resolution. 5. Technical support. 6. Trade arrangements. 7. Sources of capital. And 8. Transparency. I would like to give you my comments on these items. In doing this, I suppose I should offer at the outset an important disclaimer. I am not an expert in business. What I do have experience with, however, is commercial litigation. Therefore, my career has been developed through the process of dealing with disrupted business relationships, plans that did not work out as hoped, and other forms of commercial breakdown. From my perspective, these difficulties have given me some pretty good insight into what I have observed others doing, and more importantly, some of the things to avoid. In other words, I believe we can learn from the mistakes of others. My comments on the checklist of items to consider are as follows. First, planning strategies. In this respect, the current pressures of trade seem to suggest that most transactions occur in a matter of days or weeks, and that most problems are of a similar duration. Nonetheless, it is also equally important that adequate business planning take into account not only short-term considerations, such as transactional issues, but also that an appropriate vision be defined for the longer term, such as a 3 to 5 year plan, or in some cases, even a 10-year plan. Even though such plans tend to be somewhat conjectural, they are necessary templates against which to test the short-term business experience and to ensure that you do not lose sight of the forest because of the trees. Other elements which should be reflected in good planning strategies include establishing a local presence. Over and over again, my inquiries of business people who have had experience in larger foreign investment projects is that one of their first objectives is to ensure that they become directly involved at a local level with their project. This may mean choosing a local joint venture partner or relying on local managers or other similar arrangements. But at all times, modern entrepreneurs seek to avoid absentee management. They expect to know the local governmental and business environment in which they are investing, and in turn, to be known themselves. Establishing a local presence also means creating respect for and sharing community values. The concerns of enlightened management in this modern era cannot stop at the plant gate. The list of shared concerns between incoming capital and local communities must include not only the obvious ones of environmental and health concerns, but also the more extended ways in which business activity may affect a community. Such planning may include educational, cultural, recreational, and social support programs. After all, profits for shareholders will not be sustainable for the longer run if the ultimate behavior of the corporation is not sensitive to and consistent with the best overall interests of the local community. Another important element is to ensure adequate capitalization. In English, there is a folk expression that he who pays the piper calls the tune. Undercapitalized companies not only add enormously to the stress of those conducting their business, but also become vulnerable on pricing, quality priorities, and ultimately, even staffing of their organizations. Clearly, adequate capitalization with a sufficient reserve in hand at all times is always important. I have had experience with larger business organizations in Canada, for example, where a fixed percentage of the company's worth is maintained in the form of cash reserves so that their ability to deal with either short-term business opportunities or emergency situations is always assured. Depending on raising capital or being supported by bankers, especially in short-term situations, is always somewhat risky. Wherever possible, the business plan of a company should include adequate capitalization to cover even the most dire contingencies. For the longer run, it is reasonable to expect a good business plan to include provision for ongoing maintenance and replacement of plant and technology. Obsolescence must be planned for and avoided on a consistent basis. I will deal more extensively with the sources of capital a little bit later. Next, we should define our goals. Having a sufficiently well-understood mission not only helps those within an organization to work effectively towards their fulfillment, but allows those who are dealing outside of that organization to understand its purposes and its objectives. This becomes especially important when it is necessary to sustain the enthusiasm of all concerned during the normal ups and downs of business cycles. The best motivated employee is most likely to be one who is entrusted with the full knowledge of what the employer wants to accomplish and a fully developed capacity to be responsible for achieving that objective. A good plan should, ideally, engage the voluntary creativity and enthusiasm of its employees and reward them accordingly. I always advocate employee incentive programs which reward employees for innovation, commitment, increased productivity, and good safety programs. Let's look now at another main item on our checklist of strategies, professional services. A colleague of mine who is in the mining business and has arranged for projects in various countries in Latin America, including Peru, Brazil, Chile, has said to me in the past that he prefers to choose local advisors who are already successful and therefore likely to be trustworthy in the communities where they carry on their work. As a result, his rule of thumb is that he will tend to engage the services of the largest and best-known law firms and accounting firms wherever his company decides to invest capital. When I attempted to point out to him that there are many fine professionals who are not associated with such organizations, he agreed that could be true, but that he would not want to invest a lot of time trying to discover who they were simply because he wanted to be confident right from the beginning that his advisors were reliable and competent, and therefore he was prepared to rely on largeness and existing success as the best criteria for that selection. In checking with other entrepreneurs who have directed ventures in other countries, I have been informed that they usually rely either on their local partners or their existing professional advisors in Canada to recommend suitable professional assistance. The point of these stories is that for investors coming into a country from another jurisdiction, competent and reliable professional services are critical. Legal, accounting, engineering, and banking services are always needed at the local level. Such issues as ensuring enforceable legal agreements, tax planning, customs issues, and other such locally influenced questions require prompt, reliable professional services. The same sort of considerations apply as well to those businesses which are intending to conduct some of their activities in other well-established jurisdictions. For those who offer such professional services, it is obviously important to foreign investors or foreign industries that they be given an opportunity to know and understand how the local professions are educated and governed, and how standards are maintained for the benefit of clients. Some professionals associate themselves with transnational firms in order to forge alliances with existing business relationships. For others, the task of becoming known and trusted by potential clients outside your home jurisdiction is often a challenging one. Many international organizations exist, for example, in the legal and accounting professions. Still, however, the local professions must take on the primary responsibility of ensuring that their training and supervision are compatible with the standards and expectations of modern international business clients. The third important point in our strategy checklist deals with patents and intellectual property. Particular issues that tend to be very important to companies doing business internationally include patent protection, licensing agreements, and similar matters. While no general statements can easily be made about such topics, it is evident that those jurisdictions where such intellectual property is legally well protected and respected are more likely to attract capital in this present era than those which do not. Ultimately, it is in the best interests of all concerned that the regulation and enforcement of intellectual property rights be well defined and consistent with international standards. I can hardly imagine a greater discouragement to transnational investment than being vulnerable to improper exploitation of technology and intellectual property. Such assets today are the lifeblood of the global business community. In developed economies, it is common for governmental agencies to maintain registries for patents and trademarks and to provide suitable facilities for all interested persons to search and understand the claims made by those who hold such registered rights. As you are likely aware, litigation in this realm frequently occurs among those who dispute the claim of uniqueness or invention made by a registered holder of such rights, or alternatively, to protect such rights against alleged breaches. In international transactions, the subject is frequently dealt with in the form of licensing agreements, which allow a limited exploitation of such rights on the basis of royalty payments, together with various undertakings as to quality control and confidentiality. It is not uncommon to use international commercial arbitration as a vehicle for resolving disputes that may arise from such arrangements. I myself have participated as an arbitrator in a number of licensing cases. Interesting questions may also arise from the point of view of banking as to what security may be taken in respect of such rights and what means of enforcement against such rights may be obtainable under local law. It is obvious that well-informed and competent professionals are required to assist both investors and management concerning these matters. No one doubts that intellectual property rights have become extremely valuable corporate assets and therefore are unique forms of capital investment. The improper counterfeiting of goods or trade in knockoff products, whether in the realm of music or fashion or software, are practices which no jurisdiction should tolerate. The ultimate objective is to enhance investment in this respect. The local courts and local judiciary must be responsible to ensure that honest behavior is enforced. No parochial or limited view of commerce will meet the standards of appropriate business morality in international trade. Accordingly, it is hoped that the tangible rights associated with intellectual property, trademarks, patents, and other forms of invention will continue to be recognized and upheld. Any deviation from that standard will, in my view, ultimately detract from international investment and economic development.